Everybody, get out of here!
Meteorologists are at a loss to explain what is causing this weather and why it has taken them by surprise.
That sudden drop in temperature has half an hour ago. Mexican officials closed the border in the line of so many U.S. refugees.
We prepare to go live to Los Angeles.
Are you getting this on camera? What you see is happening now.
Look over there behind me! That's a tornado! Yes! A twister!
This is just massive.
Same-sex marriage advocates cheered Wednesday after a federal judge ordered Kim Davis to jail.
God is not happy with what you're doing.
The decision dealt a heavy blow to those who showed up to support the Rowan County clerk in the air and on the sidewalk.
We start with the downtown area, where streets including Ala Moana Boulevard and Alakea quickly flooded. In Liliha, people waded through waist-high water. Cars became submerged, and police had to block off streets, creating traffic in and around the area.
In Hungary, anti-refugee protesters have attacked asylum seekers that are stranded outside the main train station of the capital, Budapest. Refugees formed human chains to protect their women and children. Meanwhile, police have arrested and returned some 300 refugees to Belgrade, the refugee reception center on the Serbian border.
What you see here is that neighboring Turkey has taken almost 2 million, Egypt 133,000, even Iraq, which is dealing with its own crisis and problems with ISIS, has taken 250,000. But look at these wealthier states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait. 0 refugees taken into those nations.
A group of scientists are sounding the alarm over so-called gray swan hurricanes, powerful megastorms capable of producing storm surges unlike anything we've ever seen. Unlike black swan events, which are both rare and unpredictable, they say gray swans are predictable. Researchers at Princeton and MIT say these monster storms could devastate cities from Tampa to Dubai. Tampa, which sits on low-lying land and is surrounded by water, is at particular risk. Computer models show a gray swan hurricane there could create storm surges of up to 20 feet. Researchers say while the probability of one hitting Tampa is low, just 1 in 10,000 in an average year, climate change could increase those odds by 1 in 700 by the end of the century. And they're urging city planners to be prepared. Of course, Brian Norcross, the Weather Channel's senior hurricane specialist, says it doesn't matter if the storm surge is 15 feet as it was in the Great Hurricane of 1848 or 25 feet in some giant storm in the future. For those caught in it, it will be unsurvivable. I'm Matt Sampson, the Weather Channel.
Flooding in Mexico City. Man, that is a geyser. 250 homes at least flooded after a big rainstorm sweeps over the city yesterday.
Holy cow, and not to mention blocks and blocks of traffic. Mexico City's mayor warned drivers that floodwaters had closed many roads. Man. Pretty obvious there, huh?
Lieutenant Joe Glinowitz gunned down while on patrol in Illinois. Texas Sheriff's Deputy Darren Goforth dies in a hail of 15 bullets. Louisiana State Trooper Stephen Vincent shot in the head, then taunted after stopping to help a stranded motorist. Cold-blooded murders that add to a horrifying recent pattern. 7 law enforcement officers shot to death in a month. 24 officers shot and killed so far this year across America.
In every instance, it's been an act of cowardice.
Though the motivation behind the attacks may be varied, the high number has prompted the Attorney General to issue a stern declaration.
The targeting of police officers is totally unacceptable, and we will continue to stand up for the safety of our officers wherever they serve.
Get him out of the car!
Police union officials and law enforcement experts say several factors have formed the so-called perfect storm of hostility toward police. the string of police brutality cases like Eric Garner's death and the killing of Walter Scott, shot in the back by a South Carolina policeman, have fanned the anger against cops.
Is police behavior a factor here? Police behavior is unquestionably a factor. We are in an era of cell phone video that is ubiquitous. And so mistakes, heavy-handedness by the police, we can expect to be collected and retransmitted many, many times. So the police have to be smarter.
Police advocates say a saturation of media coverage has contributed to the spike, and they believe civil rights groups bear some responsibility. That chant from Black Lives Matter protesters this week in Minnesota angered many in law enforcement.
We heard the chants from Black Lives Matter organizers or protesters just this weekend after the death of Deputy Goforth down in Texas, chanting in what sounds like a pro-police attack posture.
DeRay McKesson from Black Lives Matter says the recent killings of police are upsetting, but shouldn't be politicized.
The only charge rhetoric that I've heard has been about accountability for the police, accountability for a profession that has refused any attempts to be accountable for the things that happen to them.
Now, police advocates say officers may be more hesitant to respond strongly to threats, like in one recent case in Alabama, where a detective says he didn't want to be the next cop scrutinized in the media.
Didn't act by his own admission when the perpetrator bulled his way out of the car, took the officer's weapon, and pistol whipped him almost to death with it.
Flash flooding, lightning and thunderstorms, and power outages. A downpour drenched much of our state today. The rains began early this morning and continued through the afternoon. They prompted a flash flood warning for Oahu and Maui, which have since expired. Honolulu police also issued numerous traffic advisories because of flooded roads, and power outages were reported across Oahu. The city says the reason the streets flooded is because the sudden downpour inundated the storm drain system.
At the moment, the amount of rainfall that came through was enough to fill the storm drain pipes. So we were going through a period where much of the storm drain system was carrying as much water as it could.
The weather and flooding also caused problems for drivers and businesses. Christine Ueno has that part of our storm coverage. Chris?
Well, Joe, you didn't have to go very far to see the effects of Mother Nature. People are still cleaning up and dealing with the impacts. Torrential rains slammed the state and drenched many parts of Oahu. We start with the downtown area, where streets including Ala Moana Boulevard and Alakea quickly flooded.
Driving was horrible.
You need a truck because everywhere is flooded.
Water overflowed onto the sidewalk, making it difficult for drivers to see the road and the curb.
Just go slow and look for an open lane and have a good signal before you make the move so you don't get people upset.
In Liliha, people waded through waist-high water. Cars became submerged, and police had to block off streets, creating traffic in and around the area. Tow trucks had to pull vehicles out of the water.
I'm here at Dole Cannery in Iwalei, one of the areas hit hard by Mother Nature. Store owners say this is the third time in more than a week that their shops got flooded.
Store owners walked through flooded shops assessing the damage. They used barricades and machines to protect and clean up their businesses.
Next, we're going to try and shop back this place out. But I think in the meantime, the firefighters will probably come and assist everybody else here.
Other businesses in Kalihi also had to deal with Mother Nature, using buckets and brooms to dry out. No one knows the extent or cost of their damage. They're just trying to do whatever they can before it gets worse.
The cleaning is going to be a lot harder now.
With all the problems Mother Nature caused, some people found a bright spot.
The weather is kind of bipolar. It's kind of weird, but the rain helps with the heat. Not so hot.
There were several power outages today in the Pearl City, Ward, and Waimanalo areas, but power has been restored. Fortunately, with all this rain and flooding, no major accidents were reported. Christine Ueno, KHON2 News.
Maui was also hit with heavy rain. This time-lapse video of Waiʻehu Stream this afternoon shows how quickly the water rose and flooded the surrounding property. There was also flooded reported on Kahekili Highway. In some areas, water was a foot deep. Drivers and pedestrians are being reminded not to cross fast-flowing or rising water.
Good morning, I'm Rena Ninen.
And I'm Philip Mena with the top stories on this Friday, September 4th. The defiant Kentucky County Clerk who refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples has been jailed indefinitely. Kim Davis was led away in handcuffs after a federal judge found her in contempt, saying her good faith belief is not a viable defense, as protesters on both sides of the issue gathered at the courthouse. 5 deputy clerks promised to comply.
We begin this morning with the Kentucky County Clerk's office at the center of a showdown over same-sex marriage could begin issuing licenses to gay couples this morning. This follows the jailing of County Clerk Kim Davis after she defied the Supreme Court, citing her religious beliefs. Her husband is outside the county courthouse this morning defending his wife.
She is in good spirits. I spoke to her twice yesterday.
Will they let her out?
No, they're not going to let her out, and she's not going to bow. I promise you that.
How long will she stay?
As long as it takes.
After a federal judge found Davis in contempt, 5 out of 6 deputy clerks told the judge they will distribute the marriage certificates. Dean Reynolds is also at the Rowan County Courthouse in Moorhead, Kentucky, where several couples are expected to show up today. Dean, good morning.
Good morning. When the clerk's office here in Rowan County opens at 8 o'clock, just behind me, the head clerk will not be there. Kim Davis is in jail, but in any case, licenses with her signature pre-printed on them will be distributed by some of her deputies. Same-sex marriage advocates cheered Wednesday after a federal judge ordered Kim Davis to jail.
God is not happy with what you're doing.
The decision dealt a heavy blow to those who showed up to support the Rowan County Clerk in the air and on the sidewalk.
I came here because of my children. I wanted them to see this moment in history where this courageous Christian woman is willing to defy tyranny.
Inside the courthouse, the apostolic Christian broke down as she talked about her faith and said she was unable to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, insisting, "My conscience will not allow me." Marriage, she told the court, is a union between one man and one woman. God's moral law conflicts with my job duties. But the judge said her good faith belief is not a viable defense. He held her in contempt and ordered her behind bars until she ended her defiance.
I've asked you all to leave.
The judge then gave Davis a second chance, offering to release her if she promised not to interfere with employees who had agreed to issue the certificates.
I'm not leaving.
But Davis rejected that deal.
Miss Davis is in an unfortunate situation of her own creation. She is not above the law. That's where we are. She's not a martyr.
Joe Davis is Kim Davis's husband.
She told the judge, don't matter what you say, I'm not selling.
Until she does, the judge says Davis will remain locked up. April Miller and Karen Roberts, on the other hand, will apply for a marriage license in Rowan County today for a 4th time.
As a couple, it'll be a very important day in our lives.
Along with Davis, there is one other holdout in the clerk's office, her son Nathan. Yesterday, the judge spared him jail time, but warned against any shenanigans going forward. Anthony?
Dean, thanks.
Kentucky Senator, this is very appropriate, and Republican presidential candidate Rand Paul. Senator, you just heard that news. What's your reaction to this? I know that you've come out in support of Kim Davis, but with this news, what's your take?
Well, you know, I think it's absurd to put someone in jail for exercising their religious liberty. You know, if you want to convince people that same-sex marriage is something that's acceptable, I would say try to persuade people But, you know, if we're going to use the federal government and we're going to get involved in every state, locality, you know what's going to happen? It's going to harden people's resolve on this issue. There'll be no open-mindedness on this. And I think it's a real mistake to be doing this. I think what's going to happen as a result of this is states and locality are just going to opt out of the marriage business completely.
We turn overseas tonight in breaking developments out of Hungary. Hundreds of migrant families storming a 6-lane highway in act of defiance after being turned away at that train station. Fleeing violence in their homelands, desperate to reach Austria now. Small children making the grueling journey. This little girl holding her father's hand, a little boy asleep. And this evening comes word authorities are now clashing with the migrants. ABC's Alex Marquardt with the pictures.
Today, under the blazing sun, a river of humanity. Parents pushing their children in shopping carts, carrying them on their shoulders. Some in wheelchairs, others on crutches. They left this morning from Hungary's main train station, where they've been stranded for days. Authorities have prevented trains from leaving, sending some of the refugees off to camps. Armed guards and riot gear trying to contain them. So these hundreds of others set off on foot for a 150-mile trek to Austria, most hoping they'll be able to pass into Germany, which has promised to take them in. Along this entire march, the only food and water that the refugees have been able to count on are donations from local Hungarians, and you can see that this scene is so emotional for many of them that they're crying. This march so grueling. A man here carrying a small baby girl. She's sick? Yeah, sick. Every few miles, a break. Hundreds sitting by the side of the road. Where will you sleep?
In the woods.
Even as these people try to leave Hungary, today more families coming in, crossing the border, searching for a new life. And David, the Hungarian government announced late tonight that it will be sending up to 100 buses to take these refugees to the border. You can see some of those buses right here behind me. But these refugees don't trust the government, many here suspecting they may instead be taken to camps. David.
Look at this really cool image of a comparison between two different El Nino events. On the right side, you see the one that's going on right now, which of course is a very strong El Nino. And the other one on the left side, 1997, you remember that's when El Nino kind of became a thing, at least people started to realize what it was. Basically what El Nino is a warming of the water in the Pacific, close to the equator. So when that happens, it tends to have a lot of different effects on different parts of the world, different types of weather. So Atlantic hurricane season, for instance. During an El Nino year, it tends to be a little bit on the quiet side, but in the Pacific, things are very active. Now, the big question we've been getting as far as this El Nino goes, is this going to help the drought in California? It's not a guarantee, but there's a better chance that we'll have more rain this year than we had last year.
Finding survivors under the rubble is a top priority in the desperate hours after a disaster. Search dogs can't go into every crack and crevice, but roaches can. You might not think of roaches as the hero type, but researchers at North Carolina State University are hoping they will be. They call them biobots. Scientists have strapped tiny backpacks onto cockroaches that manipulate their neural systems so they can steer them into small, dark spaces or guide them through a maze. The backpacks contain tracking gear and tiny microphones that pick up sounds of trapped victims' cries for help, alerting rescuers to their locations. Listen to this actual recording, captured by a mic'd cockroach and transmitted around a corner to a receiver 16 meters away.
1, 2, 3.
Theoretically, rescuers could control the roaches by using apps on their smartphones. What's next? Eventually, the biobots could be mounted with tiny cameras or infrared sensors that can detect heat, another way to find people trapped under debris. If this technology proves successful, first responders may someday arrive on the scene with a box of cockroaches wearing backpacks. Smart biobots that could save lives.
What's the status status of those wealthier Middle Eastern countries, Natasha, when it comes to their support for Syrian refugees?
Well, it depends on who you ask, Suhana, but most who are following this crisis coming out of Syria say that their wealthier neighbors in and around the Gulf are not doing enough, and some are doing nothing at all. I want to break down some numbers for you in terms of 4 million refugees fleeing out of Syria. What you see here is that neighboring Turkey has taken almost 2 million, Egypt 133,000, even Iraq, which is dealing with its own crisis and problems with ISIS, has taken 250,000. But look at these wealthier states: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait. 0 refugees taken into those nations, and they're getting considerable criticism in recent days because many are saying that these are some of the wealthiest countries, certainly in Asia, even in the world. High rates of GDP. They have huge levels of infrastructure, very capable militaries. They're able to take in migrant labor, so why can't they take in migrants as refugees? Now, one of the problems for many of these nations, and all 5 of the ones that were listed in the map in the Gulf, they are not signatories to the UN's Refugee Declaration from 1951, meaning they don't recognize the standard definition of a refugee and what a national responsibility is to a person who is a self-declared refugee. So they are under no international obligation to help out as far as they're concerned. Another issue is that they make it very difficult specifically for Syrians to get visas to enter the country. The visas are costly, they take a long time, and people are not able to get in. So you've got some bureaucratic obstacles there, but many are saying this is just a matter of wealthy neighbors really not interested and lacking the political will to help.
And these countries are now being pressured on social media. Natasha, what are you seeing?
Well, this was a tweet sent to me directly yesterday. It's the image of that little boy, Aylan Kurdi, and showing how many refugees have been welcomed in these Gulf states. You can clearly see here all of them listed with the number 0 next to them. A lot of people on social media are showing this image of what is someone from the Gulf telling Europe, why aren't you allowing refugees to come in? Meanwhile, they've put a barbed wire in front of their own doors. There's an Arabic hashtag, which roughly translated says, receiving Syrian refugees is a Gulf duty. This, according to the BBC, has been used more than 30,000 times in the past week. Lots of people also using the hashtag shame on Arab rulers, saying that their lack of helping out is supporting ISIS and at the same time turning away very vulnerable people. Suhana.
Thank you, Natasha.
Who went on a bizarre rampage halfway through a movie at a suburban Adelaide cinema is facing criminal charges. It's alleged she lashed out at other patrons before spitting at a police officer. Some of her outburst filmed by shocked witnesses.
Sitting in the premiere of Straight Outta Compton, patrons could have mistaken it for Fight Club. Halfway through a screening at Hoyt's Tea Tree Plaza, a 20-year-old woman forces the movie to stop as she unleashes a tirade of abuse and punches. The chaos unfolded right in front of Daniel Pictionary and Simon Nicolaitis.
Punches are being thrown and, you know, people are caught in headlocks and have to be restrained, and yeah, it was just outrageous.
Daniel concerned the woman's actions could have injured innocent bystanders.
I think people were definitely fearful of their own safety, and, you know, when you got someone swinging punches next to you, you don't want to be around them. It got out of control. You didn't know what was going to happen.
She was hitting people, she hit this girl, she spat on a couple guys sitting down just telling her to get out.
One infuriated patron throwing a bucket of popcorn at the woman, while another tried to subdue her. It took 5 staff to eventually evict the woman from the theatre.
When police arrived to speak to the woman, it's alleged she spat in an officer's face. She's been charged with assaulting police and disorderly conduct.
Some patrons returning to receive refunds today.
I just went and got some complimentary tickets, so Hoyt's handed out complimentary tickets, and they did hand out some refunds as well last night.
Will Crouch, 9 News.
The U.S. military has ordered immediate production freeze at all Defense Department labs that handle biological agents and toxins. Now, this after evidence of anthrax contamination was discovered at a research center in Utah. Officials say 2 other research centers have also been careless in keeping their records. Recently, U.S. military labs have been the focus of international concern. Back in May, it was revealed that the same Army lab in Utah had been accidentally sending live anthrax samples to all American states and 9 other countries. The laboratory was supposed to send deactivated samples of the deadly substance.
But parts of Idaho actually being covered with some snow. Isn't that nice? That's in Pocatello yesterday. They had up to 3 inches of snow in the Salmon Challis National Forest. Beautiful times out there. You know, some of the water out there is spectacular. Fly fishing, unbelievable in that part of the world. And the nice dusting of snowfall will soon be a memory. That's what I'm talking about right there. Nice little bend in the river. Isn't that gorgeous? Ryan Walburn sent those in. Ryan Walburn, rather. Thanks so much for that contribution, and thank you for giving us a chance to share with America.
Now on the huge movement of refugees in Europe. The first refugees have just started to arrive in Germany. These refugees, many of them fleeing civil war in Syria, arrived from Austria in just the past hour. Many refugees in that country are staying. There were some cheers and Austrians holding welcome signs for them. Austria says it will not try to stop more migrants from crossing its border. Let's get the latest information on this developing story from freelance reporter Kerry Skyring. He joins us from Vienna. What can you tell us about the arrival of those first refugees in Austria a few hours ago, Kerry?
Well, they arrived at the border this morning, but they've moved quite rapidly, and Austria has facilitated that. The early hours of the morning is when they were arriving. Buses and special trains were put on to bring them from the border into Vienna to the West railway station, and now they're getting onto trains, most of them, and moving on to Germany. As you said, the first ones have arrived there. The news is, though, that flow of refugees might slow down somewhat, because Hungary has said it is now stopping the bus transport of refugees to the border. Now, that will slow it down. It certainly won't stop it, because what we're hearing is that many refugees, as they did yesterday, are setting out on foot for Vienna and will arrive at the border sooner or later. Others have left a refugee reception center in southern Hungary, hundreds of them, and are also heading for the border by whatever means they can manage. But Hungary is no longer providing buses.
And so what will happen to these migrants in these countries now, in Germany and Austria?
Well, they will, providing they get out of Hungary and into Austria, then they will be offered asylum in Austria if that's what they wish. And then Austria has made it very clear it's not going to put any barriers in their way if they want to move on to Germany or any other country within the European Union. And that is what they are doing. Austria says that although 4,000 have come through in the past 12 hours or so, only about 10 of those so far have applied for asylum in Austria. So it's very clear they will be assisted once they're across the border, and that's what hundreds and hundreds are trying to do at the moment. And then basically they have their choice, Austria or Germany or further into Europe.
Okay, thank you for this update, Kerry. Kerry Skyring in Vienna.